Mr. Hice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My home state of Georgia has a relatively small coastline, more or less 100 miles on the Atlantic seaboard, but that small distance certainly is made up for by the importance of the coastline's economic and social impact on our state. Recreational and commercial fishing makes up a sizable portion of that economic impact, generating about $500 million a year and some $2 billion overall to Georgia's tourist economy. In addition to that, many Georgians obviously go to the Gulf for fishing, and be it Florida, Alabama, or wherever, to enjoy recreational fishing. And I am proud, frankly, of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources and the job they've done managing the coastal fish species and making agency staff available when addressing public concerns and questions. But very honestly, I, along with many others here, have heard from numerous individuals the frustrations that they have dealing with federal fishery management. Not only have anglers in the South Atlantic had to handle the frustrations and damage to businesses due to a 5-year moratorium on red snapper, but those thousands of Georgians who travel to the Gulf of Mexico to fish red snapper are faced every year with an almost year-round closure to federal waters and overly burdensome policies. You know, I think it's important for us to recognize that flexibility should not be a code word for overfishing. It ought to be an understanding of the willingness of our federal government to compromise for the citizens of the United States and for what's in their best interest. And I'm a co-sponsor of the Modern Fish Act, and I hope that we'll be able to show some of that flexibility. Mr. Blankenship, let me go to you to begin. Would you say that the Magnuson-Stevens Act has made it easier or more difficult for regional councils and NOAA fisheries to apply the principles of adaptive management?
I'd say it has made it more difficult to do something other than to have a total allowable catch and set a quota in a season, which is where we have gotten into this tailspin with these short recreational fishery seasons, particularly for red snapper, or this year with triggerfish, we had no season at all.
Would you in any way even challenge the term adaptive management?
You know, I'm not a big fan of the term adaptive management. I like to look at it more in a level where we look at these fisheries and we're managing it relevant to that fishery. You know, we do this in the state waters for different species. You know, we have so many different species that we manage very successfully for commercial harvest and recreational harvest and charter harvest. And so we feel like with some of that flexibility, exactly like you said, that's not a code word for overfishing. That just gives different abilities to manage these fisheries.
Well, the adaptive management is one thing, but what we really are dealing with is a one-size-fits-all type scenario, which is not very adaptive in my opinion. How would you compare the one-size-fits-all approach, and how does it affect, say, the Southeast compared to, say, Western Pacific?
You know, if you use adaptive management in that sort of term, you're right. We need to have some adaptability to the different types of management. But what we have in the Gulf is, I have never been to Alaska. I'd love the opportunity to go and see how they manage the fisheries there. But from my understanding, is that it is much more commercially based fisheries and less recreation. Where in the Gulf we have a very good split between commercial and recreational fisheries, and that makes for a little bit different paradigm for how these fisheries need to be managed.
Do you feel that some of the modifications to the annual catch limit in the Modern Fish Act would increase predictability and allow commercial anglers to better set business plans and budgets, and at the same time recreational anglers to better plan fishing excursions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.